Welcome to week 2 of our series Cheat Codes, where we're looking at the life of Paul and the cheat codes that he discovered. Shortcuts almost, but not cheating actually. Just the way God intended us to live so that we can not only get unstuck in life, but prevent getting stuck as we go in life. Last week, we were on the road to Damascus, if you remember it, and we learned that every human being needs a factory reset. Why? Because we all have corrupt files in our operating system. And then we went back further, not just a factory reset, we needed an Eden reset. A reestablishment of how we were intended to be in the very beginning and God created his creation. So if you missed last week, go back and check out Factory Reset. We're going to build on that today as we look at the life of Paul and we see how to one-up your character. One-up your character. Now, we're using a lot of video game language throughout this series as we set this up. Hopefully, you can follow along. All I know is my son loves FIFA. I don't know if you guys know the game FIFA, but when you're playing FIFA, the interesting thing about it is you can go into player mode or manager mode. And in player and manager mode, you can create your own team, you can create your own characters, and it's not just picking out the style of their kit or the color of it. You actually create these characters and you develop them. You send them for training. You spend money on them, virtual money on them. You spend money on them, you keep developing them. You don't let your players passively evolve. Instead, you invest in training and monitor growth. You invest in training and monitor growth. Well, in life, just like in FIFA, that's the same for our character. We don't come as fully formed people. We don't come with fully formed character. We are always in manager mode. We are making decisions, investing our time, pointing in certain directions that is shaping the character of our lives. Here's the thing, just like in FIFA, you can't upgrade your character while you're in the match. You don't fix your character when you're in the game, you fix it in training. And this leads to, I'm going to give you 5 thoughts around character. This is the 5 thoughts I wish I had when I was a younger man. It would have prevented a lot of pain, a lot less regret in my life, if I had just centered my life around some of these thoughts that we're going to see from the life of Paul, as well as some Old Testament portions of Scripture that we're going to illuminate here. Here's what I know about character. Competency will get you places, character will keep you there. So I say to a lot of young pastors, whenever I have a chance to speak to them, I always say this, listen, develop your character. People will applaud your competencies all day long. But when they find out you don't have character, they'll hang you. Listen, competency will get you on a stage. Character keeps you on the stage. Character is so valuable, so often not complicated, not noticed, because character is not formed. It's not formed in those places that maybe we think it should be. In fact, character is revealed in moments, but it's formed in the margins. It's revealed in moments, but it's formed in the margin. Yeah, there's a story in the Old Testament. I love this story. It's a story of 2 twin brothers. It's found in Genesis chapter 25. They're Esau and Jacob. Esau's the oldest brother, and then in that Middle Eastern ancient culture, that meant he had the birthright. And the birthright meant he got a double portion of the inheritance of his father's estate, as well as the spiritual leadership of his family. Well, the story goes like this. Esau goes out hunting one day, he catches nothing. He comes home. He's hot, he's tired, he is starving. Jacob's in the kitchen cooking stew. And Esau, which is, you're going to see a familiar habit with Esau, he follows his appetite. Here's how the dialogue goes. He comes into the kitchen, and here's what he says. He says to Jacob, I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew. It was a lentil stew. And Jacob thinks, this is my chance. So Jacob says, in response, all right, I'll trade you, but trade me your birthright for it. And Jacob says this. Immediately he says, look, I'm dying of starvation. What good is my birthright for me now? So in one impulsive moment, Esau trades his future for a meal. This is a character trait in him. The writer sums it up quite bluntly. He says he showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. Friends, this is not a story about food. It's a story about formation. It's a story about formation. In that moment, Esau reveals what was already in his heart. That moment revealed Esau's character. Moments reveal our character. Moments of trials and temptations and tests reveal our character. But they're formed in the margins, in the micro decisions that lead up to that moment. In the small, ordinary habits and the quiet places, character is revealed in moments, but it's formed in the margins. Second thought about character, flowing right out of this, is character is always our default reaction. It's always our default reaction, not our chosen response. Some people think character is formed in that moment. It's actually, character is revealed in that moment. It's your default reaction in life. So I was thinking about this week. I've been reading a little bit around game theory. You guys know game theory? It's a study of how humans make decisions, how they make decisions when the outcomes are attached or determined by the choices of others. And it's part psychology, part math, part just human nature. It was created by a guy named, or at least revealed by a guy named John Van Neumann. But it was built on by this guy. His name was John Nash. And John Nash, at 22 years of age, wrote a PhD paper, a 28-page thesis. And in fact, there's a movie made about his life. It's called A Beautiful Mind. It stars Russell Crowe. And he created this thing called equilibrium. This 28-page thesis won him the Nobel Prize. Pretty incredible guy. And actually, it formed the background of much of what you see in marketing today, is all around the game theory and the work he did. Here's what he determined and discovered. In the game of life or business or politics or relationships, you name it, whatever game we're in, and we're all in a game, there comes a point where every player's decision gets locked in. And that's when you reach what is called Nash's equilibrium. And Nash's equilibrium is the outcome has already been determined by your previous choices. This is what happens to Esau. Esau is playing out Nash's equilibrium here. His choice to eat that stew and trade his birthright was made long before he smelt that stew. All of those decisions had already been made. These outcomes were already determined by him consciously. That day, consciously, he was acting in his unconscious way. His character had already been formed in the margins. Impulse, that result in that moment, was really a reflection of his character. He had been building a pattern of choosing what felt good in the moment as opposed to what would be best later. There's a great Christian author, his name's Dallas Willard. I love his writing. He's a fantastic writer. I think he has the best definition of character I've ever read. Character is what you do without having to think about it. That is your character. What you do without having to think about it. So when the test came for Esau, he didn't think. His character made the move for him. His character made the choice for him. That's what character does. It's our spiritual equilibrium. That's why so much rides on character. We don't talk a lot about it, but a lot of people spend a whole lifetime building this life and lose it in 5 minutes. It's incredible how much risk is placed and how much weight is placed on character, and yet we spend most of our money and time developing competencies, not character. The internal setting that determines your next move when pressure hits, that's character. It's your default response, not your chosen reaction. And Esau won the moment, but he lost his future. He gave up what was eternal for what was immediate. Esau wasn't defeated by hunger. He was defeated by unformed character. So the stakes are high when it comes to character. I wish I'd known this when I was a younger man. I spent so much time trying to build up competencies because I noticed that's what people noticed. I noticed that's what got the applause from people. And it's so addictive to do it because you can put lots of checks in the win column when you do that. But character is essential. And friends, listen, it's so easy to forget that the stew is temporary, but the story is forever. We can so easily allow a moment to steal our future. All of us, we're all susceptible because we're all playing this game. We're all in this game. And when you encounter pressure moments in your life, the temptations, the trials, the troubles, that's where our character gets revealed, right? It's when we're under pressure, your default shows. It's when you're tired, the real you shows up, right? The real you shows up in those moments. It's when you're bumped. What comes out of you when you get bumped is what was inside of you. And friends, I have followed the waft of stew before. I have chosen what was immediate over what was best. I have chosen what was most impulsive in the moment instead of what would have been best for the long moment. Have you? Have you been in Jacob's kitchen recently? Listen, all of us like sheep have gone astray. We've all traded something sacred for something steaming. Every single one of us. And it's a trap. Maybe it wasn't a bowl of stew. Maybe it was a bowl of approval. Maybe it wasn't a bowl of stew. Maybe it was a bowl of control. Or a bowl of escape. Or maybe it was a bowl of comfort. Different kitchens, same meal. What I love, though, is there's always grace, friends. I love this about God. The same God that sees Esau trade in his birthright for a bowl of stew is the same God that saw the Apostle Peter deny him right in front of his face, deny he ever knew him. And yet he shows up a few days later after he raises from the grave, and he has breakfast cooked for him on the beach. I love that. Grace meets us in the kitchen where we sold out. Don't you love that about the grace of God? Because friends, I know this about everyone listening online or in person. We've all sold out. We've sold out at some point in time. And you can look over your shoulder with deep regret, or you can actually welcome the grace of God into that space where he no longer holds it against us. And we celebrated that earlier and when we celebrated communion together. But the question is, and here's where we get back to the life of Paul. How do you build the type of character that can stand up, friends? When life is pushing you around, how do you build the type of character that can resist and hold out from what is immediate for what is eternal? How do you build that type of character? Well, Paul gives us a way to one-up our character. Now, if you remember, last week, just a little summary teaching on the factory reset, we left Paul last on the road to Damascus. Remember, bright light, big voice, blinded eyes. Remember all that story? He wakes up. He surrenders to Jesus. He surrenders to God. He takes God as he is, not as he wishes he was. And remember, in that moment, he anchors his life to the resurrection of Jesus. Well, let's pick up the very next verses in chapter 9 of the book of Acts as we see what happens to Paul after he experiences this transformed life. Verse 19. Says Saul, because remember his name is Saul right now. It'll become Paul later. There's a moment where his name changes, where it's a reflection that he's a changed man. Now, Saul stayed with the believers in Damascus for a few days. And immediately he began preaching about Jesus in the synagogues, saying he is indeed the Son of God. Can we all say this word together? Immediately. Immediately. I mean, Paul cannot be contained. His fervor for Jesus, I mean, if this had happened to you, if you had heard a loud booming voice, you were blinded, then you were healed of your blindness, you heard the voice of God speak to you, would you not have a little bit of fervor around that? You either would tell nobody or you're telling everybody. There's nothing in between there. You're either telling nobody because you're thinking, that's crazy, I don't know what just happened, or you're telling everyone because that's amazing, I can't believe that just happened. Well, he can't be contained. He can't be restrained. He starts preaching in the synagogues in Damascus. He didn't wait until he had everything figured out. I like this about Paul. His first sermon wasn't a result of maturity. It was the start of it. Transformation always begins with motion. Transformation always begins with motion. I'm going to show you a picture of a man in a moment that some of you will know in this room. If you're younger, you probably won't know him. And that is your loss. I wish you had an opportunity to know this man. This man may have had the deepest character and integrity of anyone I've ever met. And I saw how it was formed. At least he gave us pictures of it. This man's name was Pastor Charles Yates. He was a pastor in this church for many years, and then he attended this church. He was actually the general secretary of our movement, a large movement across Canada. He was a leader in it. He was a diminutive, small British pastor who followed the call of God to come to Canada and begin to invest in this nation. Now, what was interesting, once he met with our staff team, and he told us a story of what happened during World War II that shaped his life forever. He had enlisted in the army. If you know the history of World War II, England was right in the middle of it. And he enlisted in the army, and his father brought him to the train station. And outside the train, just standing on the deck before he got on it, his father looked him in the eyes, and he shared this story with us. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He said this. His dad said this, "Charles, what you do tonight will determine the rest of your life." He said this, "Tonight, make sure you pray in front of the men in the barracks and you read your scripture in front of the men in the barracks. If you don't, you won't." I never forgot that line. If you don't, you won't. And Charles said that night he did just that. And he said some of the men laughed at him. Some of the men teased him. They gave him a nickname. But he was putting a stake in the ground. He was doing something immediate, something that put his character in motion, that led to transformation. He was doing something that was immediate, and I don't know what it is about the immediate that can inform the infinite, but it did in his life. There's something about our first response, and Charles's first action that night was a vote for lifelong faithfulness. I thought about it years later when I read a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he said this, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Guys, every day we are becoming something. We are either becoming less of who God made us to be, or we're becoming more of who God made us to be. You know what isn't an option? Is neutral. We're either becoming less of that or more of that. That's not a guilt trip. That means that we have inside of us, God's given us the energy and the power, especially by His Spirit, to choose to do certain things. But I've never forgot that story, because I thought, how many times have I blown that? If you don't, you won't. You don't have to be brash and offensive to preach Jesus, friends. You don't have to be the loud one at work that just posts all the time or do anything. You don't have to be that. You can be uniquely how God made you to be. But if it's important to you, people should know what's important to you. And there's ways that leaks out. If you're brand new, you just made a decision to follow Jesus, tell someone. Tell people. Tell people something's changed in my life. Something's changed in my life. I've reoriented my life around the teaching of Jesus. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, maybe you've blown it. You've been at work and nobody knows it. You know, they call them U-boat Christians. You know, they're underwater all week and they come up on Sunday. You know, listen, that's not to say guilt, if it makes you feel guilty or anything. We've all been there. But ask the Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, help me to find ways that people know what's important to me, and you're most important to me. Now, is this for Jesus' sake? No, it's for your sake, actually. There's something about allowing other people to know what Jesus has done in your life that is not only solidifying Jesus' work in your life, but it's actually an opportunity for His Spirit. You're in people's lives for a reason. That you become a bridge for the love of God to actually reach across the aisle and touch someone else. So friends, character is not formed by our intentions. It's formed by our actions. So let's go back to our story. All who heard him were amazed. Isn't this the same man who caused such devastation among the Jewish followers in Jerusalem? They asked, didn't he come here to arrest them and take them in chains and leading to the priests? I love this thing. You know, if you remember last week, Paul's not a nice guy. Paul's a religious zealot. And he's out there to persecute anyone who's following Jesus. He believes that the way of Jesus is false, it's blasphemy. So he gets these letters from the leaders in Jerusalem to go to Damascus to persecute them. And now he's preaching in the synagogues, making a case that Jesus is risen from the dead. And then they said, all who heard him were amazed. Isn't this the same man? No. No, it's not the same man. Something had diametrically changed inside this guy. He is not the same man. And you know, friends, this is the problem when you're judging people in life. We tend to judge people, we tend to see people progressively. We don't tend to see them progressively. We tend to see them statically, don't we? How many people have been guilty of taking a picture of you in a bad moment and that's who they think you are? You ever been there? How many of those Polaroids have you taken of other people? And that becomes the narrative for who they are in your life. I love this about God and how he operates. It's not about perfection in a moment. It's about progression over time. People remember your moment, but God remembers your movement. Remember that. People remember your moment, but God remembers your movement. Paul's transformation is instantaneous on the road to Damascus. And that's how salvation works. There's an instant change in identity. He has a new life in Christ Jesus. The Eden software is downloaded. But he's verified gradually. There's this progressiveness that happens, not just in his life. The man who preached in those synagogues was not the apostle who wrote the book of Romans yet. He was going to become this person. He's in the process of becoming. I love to think of everybody I meet is in the process of becoming. And you are too. The question is again, where are we trending? Where are we allowing our character to direct us in life? Grace gives us space for growth. I love that about character. I love that about God. So here's the fourth point. We're almost done here. Character is formed in the aggregate, not the immediate. Who you're becoming matters more than who you were. You've heard that statement many times. Here's what it says in Paul in Acts chapter 9, verse 22. It says, Saul's preaching became more and more powerful. So he's growing in notoriety and he's growing with the crowds. And the Jews in Damascus couldn't refute his proofs that Jesus was indeed the Messiah. This is a tremendous season of growth in Paul's life. It's certainly in his ministry and his reputation. It's growing in these moments. But what we see is just a moment here, because the rest of his post-conversion story is actually hidden in a letter he writes to a church in Galatia. You can see where the development happens, really, that creates the type of disciple that can stand in front of the powers that would be, that are oppressive, that marginalize others. You can see the man, establish the man that would be able to stand up under great scrutiny and great hardship for the sake of others. And it wasn't done on the stage in a synagogue. It was done in the quietness of the desert. There's a great quote by Eugene Peterson, who wrote the Message version of the Bible. He says this, "The work of spirituality is done in the quiet valleys, not in the high peaks." I've got to tell you, I like the high peaks though. That's where I wish it was all there. And friends, I hope, it was really wonderful listening to Hannah and Christine and Ron lead us in worship earlier. And I felt the Spirit just moving in this place. And those are high peak moments for me. We want you to experience the power of God in this place. We want you to feel the wind of the Spirit affirming who he has made you to be, convicting us, encouraging us, edifying us. We want you to feel the smile of God as you open up your hands and you're generous. And generosity always starts at home. And you're most generous with your partners in life. And you're generous with your children in life. And you're generous with your community. And you're generous with our city. We want you to feel all of that. But we know this, that these environments, as vital as they are, and they're vital, they aren't where character is best formed. And this is not the place where spiritual growth takes root often in our lives. One of the greatest gifts, I think, and if you're brand new to this church, we're a Pentecostal church. I think one of the greatest gifts that the modern Pentecostal and charismatic movement has given the church at large is spaces where you can encounter the very presence and power of God. We believe God is here today. We believe he's present. And experiencing his power is such a beautiful part of what we bring to the larger church community. I think, though, one of the greatest challenges for those of us who are maybe Pentecostal or charismatic in nature is an over-dependence on experience and an atrophy of practices that quietly shape Christ-likeness in us. On November 9th, we're going to do what we're going to call an encounter night in this room, and I hope you'll all be a part of it. We are going to lead you, Pastor Jessica, Pastor Matt, and myself, to practice the gifts of the Spirit. Because how can you know how to use the gifts of the Spirit if you don't have a place to practice them? And we're going to do that. It's going to be a great night preparing for that. Our elders will be preparing for that, even starting this week. But on November 2nd, in our chapel at church here, we're going to start chapel prayer. Anyone can drop in. Our elders are going to lead this time. You can come and pray for our gatherings, for the power of God to be here. But you can come and have people pray for you. But you can also order your life with the discipline of talking to God. And this is a built-in moment between our gatherings. So you came to the first gathering, you can leave here out this door and join us for chapel prayer. If you come to the second gathering, you can come a little early and join us for chapel prayer. We're trying to build into our community little moments that we can come alongside of you and help support the development of our character, the development of our godliness. Friends, power-filled moments will inspire you, but disciplined practices transform you. We need both in our life. So here's what Paul said. Paul talks about this season in his life in the book of Galatians, as I mentioned earlier. He said this, "Nor did I go up to Jerusalem to consult with those who were apostles before I was." So in other words, he's just been in Damascus. He's fallen on the road. He's had this download of Eden operating system in his life. He begins preaching in the synagogues, and then he does something radically strange and different here. Very counterintuitive. He says, I didn't go to Jerusalem. I didn't go where the hotbed was. I didn't go back to the epicenter. I didn't go looking for the revival center. I see Christians doing that all the time, trying to climb around and get to the greatest moment and experience as if God wasn't present with you every day. And I'm not minimizing what's out there, but Paul is onto something here. Instead, I went away into Arabia and later returned to the city of Damascus. Then 3 years later, I went to Jerusalem. 3 years later, to get to know Peter. He still hasn't met Peter. And I stayed with him for 15 days. What Paul does here is his cheat code. If you want to know his cheat code to character development, it's this. This is his cheat code here. Paul steps away from the spotlight, the accomplishments, the accolades, the notoriety, and he goes to a place of obscurity. Arabia was to the west of Damascus. It's a desert region. There's nothing there. He goes into a place by himself. And this is what my last point about character. Character starts with subtraction before it goes to addition. And here's something that is tough in the Western church. Because we are used to accumulating things. We see success as adding to our lives, don't we? We see success at that. And Paul does the exact opposite here. God often removes what defines us so he can refine us. That's what he's doing here. In the desert, Paul lost everything that used to build his confidence so God could rebuild his confidence on Christ alone. I love this. Paul's first act of obedience wasn't preaching. It wasn't to add ministry platforms, to add travel, to add influence. It was to step back and to go into Arabia. And in Arabia, he lost the crowds. No applause. No recognition. In Arabia, he lost his credentials. He had been a rising star among the Pharisees. He had all the accolades, and they're all gone in that moment. In Arabia, he lost the noise. He was alone with God and his thoughts. He lost control. His old life plan was set aside. The subtraction was necessary before God could add the mission. It was necessary. His time in the desert was not wasted time, it was forming time. And Jesus modeled this over and over again. Before he starts his ministry, where does he go? Into the desert. To be dependent on the Father alone. And frequently throughout his ministry, he would step away in silence to commune with the Father. Friends, desert moments aren't fun moments, though, and some of you are in that desert moment right now. That moment where God's voice sounds so quiet and your needs voice sounds so loud. These shaping moments in our life that teach us dependency. Learn the lessons of the desert and learn the lessons of subtraction so you can embrace the fruit of addition and flourishing. Friends, character, like so many things in the Christian way, they're not hard. They're easy, but they're hard. This is not some sort of formula that is eureka moment. This is just got it out type stuff. This is making small decisions in the right places. So friends, before we conclude, let's review these 5 things. Character is revealed in the moment, but it's formed in the margins. Whatever comes out of us in that moment, that's our real character. It's formed, though, in our training. Character is our default reaction. It's not our chosen response. The character is what you do when you don't even think about it. That is your character in motion. Character isn't shaped by intention, it's shaped by motion. Sometimes we have such great intentions. Those are not the things that form character. It's the practices that form character. Character is formed in the aggregate, not the immediate. It's accumulating over time. This is what Paul became the Apostle Paul. He wasn't born the Apostle Paul. He wasn't even on the road to Damascus. He wasn't born again the Apostle Paul. He had to become that over time. And finally, character starts by subtraction before it moves to addition.